Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Son of a Blitch podcast. I'm your host, George Blitch. Today, I had the distinct pleasure of sitting down with Mason Huffman to have a wonderful conversation about his journey to becoming the executive chef at Jester King, his work with the new School of Traditional Cookery with Jesse Griffiths, and his love of the outdoors, fishing and hunting and cooking. We had a wonderful conversation. We talked a little bit about culture and the world and where we're at these days, and just had a wonderful conversation. So I hope you guys enjoy and tune in. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe to my channel for future updates. And yeah, thanks again for tuning in. Take care. Hey, Mason, how you doing today?
Doing well, George. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Look, I know we got a lot to cover. Your role as an executive chef at Jester King, time spent in the Austin Zoo, working with Jesse Griffiths in the new School of Traditional Cookery, being an outdoorsman and everything. But I figured a good time to start with your timeline is how you first gained an appreciation for and love of the outdoors. Who influenced you and got you out there fishing, hiking, hunting, all of that? Why don't you go ahead and just kind of start us off there?
Yeah, definitely. I was born and raised in Austin, Texas. Austin kind of has roots in the outdoors. A lot of people here are very into the outdoors, but my parents are probably the ones that really got me into being outdoors the most. My dad is from New Hampshire and West Virginia and spent tons and tons of time outdoors. And that really inspired me to want to spend more time outdoors. We went camping a lot of times as a child, as I was a child, and through my young adult life. And we did like week-long trips, canoeing trips that lasted a week and a half. Some really primitive stuff, and it was just amazing. I mean, as soon as I got away from the hustle and bustle, and you couldn't hear vehicles, I was like, wow, this is really amazing. And that evolved into, what else can I get from this? And every time I learn a new skill, every time I learn about a new animal, like identifying birds, for example, it opens up a new dimension to the outdoors that was there all along and just hadn't paid attention to it until all of a sudden your eyes are open to it. So yeah, my parents really started that spark. And then when I was young, Steve Irwin was an idol. I mean, I watched all of his shows, and he really, really excelled my love for animals, especially animals that don't get a lot of recognition, and like reptiles and snakes, etc. That a lot of people are afraid of. And although there's some reason to be afraid of them, they're also deserve respect just as much as any animal. So
sure,
that really sparked my love for the outdoors and animals.
Nice. Well, kind of going back, you're talking about your canoe trips and stuff. Were you doing stuff around Texas? Were you traveling all around the country? What was kind of the areas you guys hit up a lot?
Yeah, so we did several trips on the Buffalo River in Arkansas. It's the Buffalo National River. There's smallmouth that go through this river, and it is just beautiful. There's big bluffs on the side. So there's outfitters that will take you way upstream, drop you off, and then you'll park your car way downstream, and then you just float down to your car and fish along the way, camp along the way. There's tons of banks. Like you can pull over on any bank and camp there and gather firewood, catch fish, cook the fish, and enjoy the beauty. And the river smallmouth fight more than any other fish, I swear. And then we've also done, I think it was 12 days in Manitou Island, which is cool. A island on Lake Michigan that has a lake on it. It's a pretty small island, so it's a unique formation. And the smallmouth there are also really large. The fact that there's smallmouth there is kind of beside the point of why we went there, but the smallmouth definitely made it a lot of fun. And that island, you have to take a foot ferry over and have all the gear that you need for that week. And then the foot ferry comes back. I think it takes trips 2 or 3 times a week. So you're kind of stuck there after you're there.
So tell me, for those who don't know what a foot ferry is, can you explain that?
Yeah, no wheels are allowed on the island. So you have to carry everything that you have with you. And so you get on a boat. It's just a boat. And you take a boat over. That's what a foot ferry is.
Right on, right on. So when you were doing some of this fishing and stuff, were you I know you mentioned y'all would cook some of these up, but would you have a hand in cooking? Like, when did you first start, developing your skills and kind of, at the younger age and stuff? Were you involved in that process?
Yeah, I was a little bit, mostly whenever I was younger, I would lean on my parents to show me how to do some of these things. My dad would cook fish, but it's very different from the way I cook fish now.
Explain.
So he would, cut up onions and butter and throw it in a foil pan, and the fish was cooked and it had salt on it. But there's so many more aspects to cooking fish, like browning fish, searing fish, eating fish raw, different types of fish, ceviche. It's just, there's so many more things that you can do. And cooking fish whole, grilling, smoking. It's just, I love cooking fish a lot. And so that is probably, I would say my father is partly responsible for me loving cooking fish. But yeah, I've grown a lot since I first learned to cook fish. Also, my mom is she's retired now, but she was a full-time professor at Texas State. In fact, they both were. And she was the head of the Department of Nutrition, and she taught food and family science. And so with her, and actually both my parents are full professors in the science industry. And they really taught me to love the science of cooking. What's happening on a technical level, on like a small detailed level, like why do we do these things when we cook? And I think that translates to what I do today so well. It's why I think I was able to pick up the role as executive chef without formal chef training.
Yeah.
Because I love science. If I were to start my life over, I probably would be a physicist. But I love the details of science and cooking.
Well, you can juggle both of those at the same time, right? I mean,
Sure,
just one more thing to throw in the bucket. Well, talk about that kind of idea of that, like, science and that breakdown. Like, what were you learning? Because, a lot of people, it's like, oh, I can fry a fish, I can do this, but like the technical science aspect of like how things are breaking down and how maybe the muscles and the tissues or how the fat renders and things, that's not something that, probably a lot of the laymen out there, maybe understand or know. So what was it that you were picking up on at that time that you were starting to kind of gather that knowledge about how everything happens when it's cooking?
Yeah. So, I mean, literally every aspect of cooking, every single thing that you do has science involved in it, whether it's, obviously temperature control for safety, because you're killing off bacteria, or using acids to tighten muscles, or, moisture loss, fat rendering, all these, science and biology is defined by chemistry, and chemistry is defined by physics. And so and cooking is one and the same. So all of these things have to do with cooking, every single aspect of it.
What do you think is probably the most standard thing that people do where they mess up if they're like cooking like fish? Let's say, for instance, like, there's certain things that people may just like, oh man, you're doing it wrong. Like, is there anything that you've been able to point out that you can give that one quick tip for folks like that?
Don't overcook your fish.
Yes.
Yes. So with fish, that's it. Don't overcook your fish. But also don't be afraid to use high heat with fish. When I first started cooking fish, I almost always did low and slow because I didn't want to beat it up. But searing fish is a game changer. I mean, cooking it on high with butter, garlic, and thyme, it's the best way to taste fish. A little bit of lemon on it. If you got good quality fish and you want to just taste the fish, that's what you want to do.
Nice. You mentioned you didn't have this traditional background of like a culinary school. But was there anything that kind of helped you was it just kind of working in restaurants that you started learning? I mean, it sounds like your parents, and especially your mom there, kind of like maybe helped you out with, kind of learning a little bit of the science and the things behind that there too. But is there any kind of other training that you went after? Is any kind of camps or anything you did while growing up, or did you just kind of jump into the restaurant world and that was kind of like, trial by fire in that way?
I did do some training when I was in high school. I took culinary arts at Bowie High School. They've got a really good program there. There was a two-hour course. And I took it for 2 years, and I learned a lot of techniques. I learned how to use a knife in the kitchen. I learned how to cut things, and which is, there's a lot of techniques that aren't necessarily intuitive. So that definitely gave me a leg up. And I did definitely cook before that. I really enjoyed cooking, but this is before YouTube. This is before like the vast, intricate knowledge web we have right now, where you can literally learn how to do anything. And so, going to a class is the way you did that back then. Yeah. Learning from somebody that's talking to you is the way you did that. Is the best way to do that anyway. And so, yeah, took in culinary arts in high school. And then I worked at a couple small restaurants here and there, like just for a little bit. And then the other training that I received was on the job, really at Jester King, is where I learned most of how I know what to do today. The chefs that I worked with, Damien Brockway, who was the executive chef at Jester King before me. I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot from Amanda Turner. And she was really, really great. I mean, like vast knowledge, and she loved to share it. She was easy to ask questions to, and she would just go into, yeah, this is why I'm doing this. And she also, we shared the science aspect of like why things are doing what they're doing, why we're doing these things. Those people I learned a ton from, and I'm still learning. Not that I've finished learning.
Right. But yeah, they were a good foundation for, your learning principles there. Well, when did you first start at Jester King?
Yeah, I started at Jester King at 14, sorry. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I just started as like a college job, basically. And I was going there. I was working at it was actually Stanley's Farmhouse Pizza at the time.
Okay.
So Stanley's Farmhouse Pizza owned all the 165 acres out there. And then Jester King bought a portion of that for the brewery. And then Stanley's Farmhouse Pizza, which is primarily wood-fired pizza, they were like the restaurant aspect of the property, and Jester King was the beverage aspect. And it was wide open spaces. It's really nice out there. And I fell in love with it. I mean, like I said, I started in 2014 and started working more and more and more. And then as Jester King took over Stanley's, they bought Stanley's out and they bought all the property. They hired me on as sous chef. Right at that same time, I graduated from college, from Texas State, as a wildlife biology degree. The entry-level position for wildlife biologists paid about $13 an hour at the time, which seems crazy.
Yeah.
And sous chef paid a lot more.
Yeah. If they had the same equal pairing of pay, do you think that you would have pivoted over towards that wildlife biology thing, or did you just feel that love for cooking and you just wanted to kind of keep that flame going?
There were a lot of factors that led me to not immediately pursue my wildlife biology degree. When I was going to school, for several years, I wanted to be a game warden. Mm-hmm. I was like full throttle, like this is what I'm going to do. And I did a ride along when I was going to college. It was a couple of years. I knew it took a while to get into the school. You usually have to apply several times. Most people do, and then they throw you in West Texas for a couple of years. And so I was ready for it. And the more ride-alongs you do, the more likely you were to get the job. And I did my first ride-along, and I knew that game wardens are police officers, but I was hoping that mostly what they did is you know, policing the angler and hunting community and the outdoors. But you know, I've got a massive respect for game wardens because they have to deal with the same things that other cops have to deal with, like throwing drunk people in jail. You know, a lot of times they'll do it on a boat, and that's what their summer job is. Yeah, there's some fishing involved there too, but you know, they're the ones on the water that are pulling, slapping handcuffs on drunk guys and throwing them in jail.
Sure.
And you know, the idea, like a lot of people in the hunting and fishing world, I hear about it, they don't like game wardens. And you know, there's no reason to not like a game warden. They're there to protect the things that you know, we care dearly about. And you know, you shouldn't be breaking the rules, and if you're not breaking the rules, then what do you really have to worry about?
Exactly.
So anyway, long story short, I realized that I didn't want to be a game warden. I didn't want to be a police officer. Yeah. So nearing the end of my school, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. And I had an opportunity to work at Jester King. I was already, you know, obviously had my foot in the door, and it worked out really well. You know, I like the team. I like the place. Jester King is a fantastic company. So I've been really happy to work there, even though I haven't pursued my wildlife biology dreams. But at the same time, I'm kind of doing that through working at Jester King.
Yeah, well, and you have some other avenues too, which we'll get to at the new School of Traditional Cookery soon, and kind of, you know, working out and being out in the field and as well, because I know when you're at Jester King, you know, you're at that spot, but I mean, it's not like your typical restaurant. You have 165 acres, multiple events going on. I mean, can you just kind of walk us through a little bit about that? Because I know there's, I mean, massive buildings. You guys have, you said, I think 1,500 to 2,000 people on some weekends. I mean, it's not a small place. It's pretty big.
Yeah, no, definitely. During the pandemic, we were starting to open up along with everybody else. We had like 3,500 people on site per week, which is an insane amount of people. I mean, and so we're a volume restaurant. It's really what it breaks down to, is that we have to pump out a lot of food. We have to have a lot of food to be able to feed all these people. And so we're prepping during the week to feed everybody. And we've got the main restaurant, which there's several bars located all around the property. In order to have this many people on site, you have to take their order quickly. You have to get through lines quickly. And with that many people, it gets busy. It can be like a stepped on ant pile out there. So there's the restaurant and brewery where we have a pole barn. There's a big field. We have a farm which consists of goats and a hemp field. The hemp field is not operational right now, but we do have some hemp butter left over that we cook with for some items. We have the goats, which we do metal goat yoga. We do other like sunset goat yoga. And then there's also just goat experiences where people can come in and pet the baby goats. We've got a herd of about, I think it's a little over 50 now. We have the event hall where we house weddings and corporate events, pretty much anything that people want to do out there, we're able to do. I actually got married out there. I met my wife at Jester King, and then we ended up getting married out there. So
that's so awesome. Yeah, how long have you been married now?
5 years.
Oh, congrats, man. That's great. So what was she doing there? How did y'all meet? Or was it just this fate walking across the field and you saw each other?
She was actually working at Jester King when I was working at Stanley's Pizza.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, we knew of each other, and then we met, and then we hit it off, and, you know, Jester King bought Stanley's, and, you know, we saw a bit more of each other, but yeah, we hit it off really quickly, and just went on from there.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Well,
yeah, she's a school teacher now, but
okay,
that was just a college job for her as well.
Yeah. Okay. What does she teach?
Second grade. Yeah,
right on.
Second grade, just down the road from me, South Austin.
My wife taught in elementary as well, man. It's do you ever get to go in there and do some guest reading spots or anything like that? And
every now and then I do.
Yeah. I've done a few of those. It's pretty fun, man.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. That's really neat, man. So I know you kind of mentioned some of the things that Jester King has, like, and I think I had seen that there's like multiple cabins you can even stay in there too, right? Can't you kind of go there for a weekend experience as well?
Yeah, definitely. We've got an inn on site as well. that has several cabins. So, oftentimes we'll have full property buyouts where someone buys out the inn, they'll buy out the event hall, and then say their wedding party will stay at the inn, and we'll cook for them at the event hall for their wedding, and we'll cook for them for like brunch the next day. Usually is how it works. And so, yeah, there's a kitchen at each one of these places.
Oh, that's cool. So when you were talking about all these amounts of people and all the events and stuff, I was curious about how you're organizing and setting up the, procurement of all the different food that goes onto that. Is that one of your roles as well? And how are you kind of foreseeing what you're going to, put on the menu for that week, or is it kind of a set standard thing? Kind of walk me through that process there, because I'm very curious about how restaurants work in that, capacity.
Yeah. So we mostly have a set schedule. We have some specials that we'll roll through. If, we do specials for like special days, say like Mother's Day, we're probably going to do Eggs Benedict with house smoked ham and something like that. And that'll just be like a 1-day special. Most of the time, most of these things are, most of the menu items are set, and then we'll rotate them out seasonally.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the event hall and the inn, we have several items on a menu for them to select from a set menu, and then we go that route. We also do like, we can either do like full catered event where everybody gets a plate, and we can do buffet style. We can do barbecue, anything along those lines. And in terms of like where we get all this stuff, first of all, we have to handle a large volume because we go through so much. So
sure.
Some of the purveyors that we have, just clean them out.
Yeah.
It's difficult to keep some of the items that we want to use in stock. So we do try to buy as locally and seasonally as possible, but it's not always an option for us.
Yeah.
So how do I manage all these things? Is that one of my jobs? I right now am more of like project manager. I'm dealing with like, several different departments, and what I've done is I've put people that I trust in a seat. And I need to create the environment for them to be able to do the job properly. I want to facilitate hard work, and I want to facilitate respect for all of the employees, so that everyone's able to have the bandwidth and the ability to do what they need to do.
Well, and you kind of talked, we had a discussion earlier, and you kind of mentioned about how you define it. It's like, it's not your kitchen, and some executive chefs, owners, it's my kitchen. You're going to do it this way. You talk about this concept of it's our kitchen, and that collective effort from everybody, gathering everybody's strengths, helping people work on their weaknesses to be able to become strengths. Like, you have a different mindset, which I feel like probably is what helps to create such a good, warm, learning and successful environment around you. And I was just kind of curious if you can kind of talk about your team and that team aspect that you have. Like, how many people are working with you, and how are you kind of putting all of their efforts to work to get the best product out, and, as a representation of Jester King?
Yeah, definitely. So we've got about 14 employees now in the kitchen. 3 sous chefs, a baker, the rest are line cooks. One of them working mostly in events, but they also come and work line as well. So I trust all of these people to, and I do a lot of delegation as well. So, I put aces in their places. People that have strengths in certain areas, they're going to be, although I'm going to put them in a place where they're going to be the strongest, I still encourage and like learning in other areas, so that they are still able to better themselves and be a valuable asset, say, whenever they move on to the next place, which I'd be crazy to think that anyone's going to stay with me forever. So it's kind of an old school way of thinking for chefs that, it's my kitchen, but they still definitely exist out there a lot, where, it's kind of a French old way of thinking, where people work for a chef. It's like, it's that chef's kitchen. It's not anybody but the chef's kitchen. And if you're creative, you're inspired by that chef. When I have people that are working for me that are more talented in some areas than I am, and I have to lean into that, and I learn from them. I ask questions just as much as anybody should. So yeah, it's love and respect for the people that you put in the position that leads to strong leadership and a good working environment.
Oh, those are all great points, man. I fully agree. I was kind of curious, just about some other folks that, have been influential. I mean, you mentioned the ones at Jester King there too. And, I guess this is a good time to talk about how you got involved with also working with Jesse Griffiths. For those who don't know, he's an award-winning chef, a James Beard Award winner, 2 books above me over here, A Field and the Hog Book. And Dai Dewey is a restaurant he runs in Austin. And then you kind of, eventually ended up working with the New School of Traditional Cookery. And I'd love for you to kind of talk about that. But how did you first kind of, you guys become in each other's orbits, and how did you, end up then working with him?
Yeah. I love working for Jesse. Whenever we first met, he was starting a concept, a trailer at Desert Door in Driftwood, Texas. And he was like, there was a chef position open, and a mutual friend of ours, Amanda Turner, who I mentioned earlier, she recommended me for the position. And although I'm extremely happy at Jester King, the opportunity to work with Jesse was really alluring. So at least meet him. So I went in for an interview, and they liked me. They were like, all right, you can meet Jesse next time. I was like, all right. I met him and we hit it off. I had actually, it was during the winter, during hunting season, and I had shot a doe with my bow that morning. So it was a pretty cold, pretty brisk morning. And so, man, it's cold outside. I was like, yeah, it's really cold in the tree stand too. And harvested a buck or a doe, and processed it all. And we started talking about that, and then got into the interview, and was like, yeah, like, you're not really like the best fit for this, because you've already got your thing going at Jester King. This is like more of a more tightened up role, with a little bit less freedom, etc. And so what he really wanted me to do is work with him at New School of Traditional Cookery. I talked about my love for leadership and love for creating an environment where people want to work for me and want to feel happy doing what they're doing. And so then he put me on for there was one class of New School of Traditional Cookery left that season, and he put me on for that one, and then it worked out great. Did almost the whole season with them last year, and many more to come. I look forward to becoming more and more involved with New School Traditional Cookery as well.
That's awesome. Well, kind of for those who don't know, can you explain what that is and how people get involved, and kind of maybe walk me through, from the end user? Like, if I'm signing up and I'm going to come out to this ranch, I'm going to be there for X many days. What am I coming to expect? What's the experience on that end of things?
Yeah. So New School of Traditional Cookery is it's a class where we teach hunting skills, butchery skills, cooking skills. It's a weekend, so you're going to get there on Friday and leave on Monday. There's every aspect of hunting is covered, from range safety, knowing when to pull the trigger, know where to shoot, how to maintain breathing properly. We get everybody all across the board, people that have never fired a gun before to experienced hunters. Jesse's extremely well known in the hunting community for people that like to cook their own game. A lot of hunters don't know what to do with it. They just they'll grind it up and use it for taco meat, or the occasional steak, or they don't have the tools that chefs have, and they don't have the knowledge that chefs have. And so Jesse is really bridging that gap through his books. The A Field and Hog Book are where all of the recipes for all the meals this whole weekend come from. So every single thing that we eat is from those books. So the clients get a copy of each one of those books, and so they get to see what the meal looks like. They get to ask questions all throughout the process, and they get 3 hunts. And on this property, it's a property in South Central Texas. It's actually a peninsula on Lake Corpus Christi. 6,000 acre ranch. It's called Cartwright Ranch. It's the home of Peaceful Pork. It's where I actually get my pork from, and a lot of nice places in Austin get their pork from. Oh, cool. Really, really, really delicious pork. Couldn't recommend them more. So we have, there's pig farms there, pig pens, and there's tons of wild boars. Sometimes the pigs get out and those become feral almost, after just a couple months. They start showing the same tendencies that wild-born pigs do. There's also lots of deer, some very large deer, and there's a lot of ponds where we shoot ducks. There are some dove, but it's not always enough to make a good hunting weekend for dove.
Right. Might be a little supplemental thing. Hey man, here's an appetizer kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. It's like, oh, there's a lot of dove flying today. Let's shoot some dove. But I love duck hunting. I feel like I'm really passionate about duck hunting. I think that's one of the things that I really brought to the table for them. Is I love the hard work. I love the effort that goes into it. And with duck hunting, man, you experience so much that nobody else gets to experience. You're in a world that humans do not spend time in. And so that's one of the things that I love to do with New School of Traditional Cookery is get people into the same things that I'm into, because I'm so passionate about it. I'm so passionate about these things. I want other people to experience them. So that's what I do.
That's awesome. I mean, it's contagious. And, someone who really loves what they're doing, it's like, I was just reading this book that's kind of I guess it's like a companion to hunter education and for those who are instructors. And it just talks about like, when you have someone in front of you that really loves what they're doing and how they can impart that onto that end user, that it's monumental what people can go home with in that personal experience. And it sounds like, being able to get them in there and work on butchering and the hands-on approach and stuff too. It's not just this idea, yeah, you come out to this ranch and here's, a gimbal, you can go ahead and throw your animal up there and, hopefully you know what you're doing. Like, you guys are really helping them out. And then also kind of how you're prepping that meat for this particular dish or whatever. And it sounds, are y'all also like packaging and stuff there too? And kind of, taking everything back with them and kind of butcher ready? Like, what does that look like on that side of things?
It's all over the spectrum. Yep. So first of all, as all involved as people want to be, they can be. If they want to do the whole butchery themselves, they can do the whole butchery themselves. If they don't want to touch it at all and they just want us to do it, then we do that as well. So, we really cater to the client as much as we possibly can. After the kill, we'll have the client assist with tracking as much as they want to, or if they're just like, yeah, can you go get it and bring it, then we'll be happy to do that. And then when it comes to actually butchering, we have most of the people that get on this, become a part of this class. They really want to learn. They really want to know the details of like, why are you doing that? What's the best way to do this?
Sure.
And, with my knowledge as a chef and a hunter at the same time, I'm able to like, show people like, this is why we're doing it this way. You want to be careful of this because it's going to end up like this. So I think, people really do want to learn, and we give them the opportunity to.
And this is primarily rifle only, right?
Yeah.
Or you, okay. Yep.
Rifle and shotgun. Yeah. I mean, okay. We have, I think in years past, there has been a bow stand, but it's mostly rifle and hunt and a shotgun.
And how many people you got coming out on any given weekend?
6.
Okay.
Yeah,
and then
so 6
how many
clients,
guides?
6 clients and 6 guides. So we have one client per guide, or one client per guide. And so we kind of mix it up a little bit. If it's in duck season, then, I might take one guide with me and then 3 or 4 hunters, and to have a smaller footprint. And then we'll get a lot of ducks depending on which area we're at. And so, we keep it a little bit fluid, depending on what the weather's like, what's the best option for hunting, whatever animal.
And what kind of ducks are you guys normally taking down at that area?
Yeah, there's a lot of teal. It's Texas, so there's a lot of teal, a lot of gadwall. We didn't shoot any, but we saw some cinnamon teal, which is a pretty special
That's
bird. Cool. And then there's plenty of divers as well. We don't get wood ducks down at that area, but get like the occasional redhead in that area, bluebills, ringnecks, that kind of thing. Northern shovelers occasionally as well.
What's your personal favorite?
Oh man, probably wood duck. I've shot one mallard before. There's not a lot of mallards in this part of Texas, but I shot one, and that was fantastic. That was some of the best meat I've ever had. But I do love wood ducks and teal. Teal are basically like large dove, and they taste fantastic, but they're pretty small.
Yeah. Well, we got a ranch out in our family in Central Texas, and I've seen one mating pair of wood ducks. That's it. It's just the two, like they find their way on this one pond, and I can't go ahead and take them out. I'm like, right. They've been there for years. They're like the residents there. I'm hoping they bring all their friends, because I'm not much of a duck hunter. I've had some that I've taken, more just opportunistic. I'd love to get into it a little bit more, but I've always been told they're so tasty. But I see those, and I'm like, they're such a cute couple. I want to just let them be, But bring your friends. So eventually, if the cousins show up, then they're
That's right.
Going to be taken out. So, do you have a favorite animal that you like to hunt, and also a favorite that you like to cook?
Yeah. So whenever I first started hunting, my dad took me hunting when I was 16, and I shot a deer with 30-30, like 110-year-old 30-30. And
awesome. Was that in your family history? What was the story on that?
Yeah, the gun was my grandfather's. It's a Savage 99.
Cool.
And it's like 130 now. And he knew G.R. Douglas, who's a famous barrel maker, and he had G.R. Douglas put a barrel on that rifle, lever action 30-30, and converted it from 300 Savage to 30-30 Winchester.
Oh, wow.
It's a fantastic gun. I love it.
I'm going to need to get a picture of that. We're going to have to throw that in there so people can see. That's an awesome, yes, so much history with that rifle in and of itself. You doing open sights, or you got a scope on it now?
Well, whenever I shot that deer, it had, a very, very old scope on it that you can barely see through now.
Long, yeah.
Yeah, we're long and about that big diameter. But the iron sights on it are absolutely killer. It's really easy to hit the bullseye up to 100 yards with iron sights. So that's what I would primarily use. I haven't used it in a while, so I've got some little more modern things that I use.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, going back to that experience though. So your first year, and you said you're how old? 9?
I was 16.
16 a minute. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, I was 16, and my hunting stayed a little bit dormant after that. When I was working at the Austin Zoo, I actually took apart my second animal there. So that deer was the first one, and then I was a zookeeper at the Austin Zoo for about 6 years, and we had a rancher down the road call us and say, "Hey, one of my cows broke its leg, and I had to put it down. Do you want it?" And we were like, "Does anyone know how to take apart an animal?" I was like, "Yeah, I kind of do." So a 1,500-pound cow was the second animal that I took apart, and it took almost all day, and we fed it to the lions, tigers, and bears, and cougars and jaguars, and some of the smaller primates or carnivores as well.
Wow, that's quite a huge difference than, I mean, it's like something that's like 10 times the size of the deer you probably got.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean, and knowing what I know now, I wish I had that opportunity again because I would have done a much better job of it. But I mean, it was for animals, so what do they really care?
how does this cow come to you? And how is it that you like lay this out? Do they have like, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of different things on site at a zoo, but is there a facility that's set up for that? What does that look like? I'm just so curious.
No, we have a walk-in that we were able to like, keep big chunks of meat in, but I basically just did it on the ground.
Mhm.
Food safety isn't necessarily a concern. I didn't want it to rot, but
Right.
so they brought it on a flatbed trailer and then took it off the trailer, and I just did it in a field and took it over one chunk at a time. You work on one side, just like working on a field dressing, uh, like no gambrel and no hanging. You
Right.
do work on one side and then flip it over and work on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We'll continue with your story then about that.
Yeah. So took apart the cow. That was the second animal that I took apart, and then a few years later, a friend took me dove hunting, and dove hunting is like the gateway into hunting. It's really fun. There's a lot of action. It's a social hunt, and dove tastes delicious. So I started doing that. I went out a couple times with him, and I was hooked, man. I went full throttle into learning about all other types of hunting. Um, so I did several dove hunts, and then I went into did some more deer hunting with a rifle, and then when I started working at Jester King, I had the opportunity to actually hunt on site, and so I learned to bow hunt because we can't use a rifle on site. So
Sure.
I'll actually hunt on Jester King property on the 165 acres that we've got there. So learned bow hunting, and then I also learned duck hunting, which I learned duck hunting like by myself without a mentor, which is really difficult without someone having a boat that they can show you like an easy way to do things. You got to learn things the hard way, and yeah, you can ask people, but a seasoned duck hunter knows so much that and has shoulders that you can stand on when you're struggling to learn things. And it's different now that we've got tons of resources on the internet and YouTube where you can actually learn these things, but without actually having a mentor, it's pretty difficult. And that is like what I love to do now. It's definitely one of the things that inspired me to want to become a hunting guide, and once makes me want to like teach everybody the things that I know, because I know how difficult it can be to try to learn something like this on your own.
Yeah, no, it is, man. I mean, I sometimes take it for granted because I just kind of grew up in it. I mean, it was my uncle taught me how to hunt. I mean, I remember going out as like 4 or 5 years old and kind of
Mm.
being in the stand. And then I think I was like probably like 9 years old, started kind of going hunting with them. And I think I got my first deer at like, I think I was 11, but it was just, I was always around it. I saw the butchering. Of course, like when I was a kid, I'd start to do something. They're like, give me that. You're taking too long, and it's like,
Mhm.
now I kind of wish I had a little more time to struggle, because it's like that's how you learn things. Remember the first time no one was there, I shot a deer and had like my knee was in like a brace. I had like a soccer injury, and I was like, I couldn't get the deer up into the back. It was a mess, like just trying to like figure all these things out on my own. I'm like, oh, it sure does help having someone else around to give you the hand. But then I just kind of was like, okay, I got to remember what it was. And it wasn't, I wasn't looking up YouTube in there. But it was like having that experience on your own, much like I'm sure like hunting ducks and such, and anything else that you do on your own, you do acquire a lot of knowledge from, sometimes making the mistakes. And, I think that's sometimes the best way. I've taught some of my friends how to, butcher, and then all of a sudden they'll look at me, what do you do? Is you give it a shot. I'll point it
Yeah.
out if something goes terribly wrong. But other than that, like, sometimes you just kind of got to get in there and figure things out on your own, and work your way around and feel the animal, where the bones are, whatever it may be. So, but man, yeah, having a mentor and someone to walk you through is, it's amazing and very important. And that kind of was, when you were mentioning that, it kind of made me kind of think about when you and I just first met. a couple months ago, when they're filming the TV show Non-Typical Outdoorsman TV at the Why Not Ranch. It's a collection of Outdoor Stewards Conservation Foundation, Texas Parks and Wildlife. My company, Map My Ranch, made some maps for the hunt. And I was also a mentor there. And it was about getting first-time people who kind of worked in the industry involved in going out and hunting and learning about kind of getting in there and being in a stand and then, butchering and such. And just being involved in that and seeing, first-time hunters, and you see it, through, the new School of Traditional Cookery and, maybe taking some friends out there too. But I hadn't really turned on a lot of new hunters recently. And so it's kind of a cool thing to be involved with once again. And you guys, you came out with Jesse and y'all cooked 4 amazing dishes for everyone to really kind of understand and see what, how great hog meat can be. Because I think a lot of folks, especially you kill a big old boar or something, and a lot of people are, it's stinky, take it to the gut pile, when nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, it could stink, but it is still delicious meat. So what was like that experience for you? And do you have a lot of, times where you and Jesse kind of go out and do that kind of thing? Or is that more kind of the new school, that you're kind of doing in that format where you're coming out together and doing those types of things?
Yeah, that's mostly what we do. We'll do that sort of thing when in this type of scenario. Yeah, I remember watching that video, and I think what stuck out to me the most was one of the guys that was there seeing it for the first, going hunting for the first time. He was like, yeah, I'm from Austin, Texas. I've never seen a sunrise in the woods. And I was like, wow, how could you not experience that? And, that's the kind of thing that, I think that seemed like that was one of his biggest takeaways. And that's exactly what I want people to experience. I mean, especially when you're duck hunting, the sunrises are usually the most epic then, sitting on the water. Anyway, yeah, that's we met a lot of really good people there. A lot of the people that work for Texas Parks and Wildlife and for Stewards of the Outdoors, and you, a lot of great people that just want to get people into hunting, and non-typical outdoorsmen, focusing on getting people with diverse backgrounds and history out as well. I mean, fantastic. I was really happy to be a part of that.
Yeah, man, it was an honor. It's such a cool thing to see, on being just that, kind of hunter. And I have, land in my family that I've hunted. I haven't done a lot of public land hunting. And so I have a different perspective than a lot of other people who are coming into hunting. And being able to kind of see how other hunters come in and they view it or their history, and talking to so many different people there, I gained a lot of knowledge just talking to some of the folks, even the first time, hunters, just what their experience was. And like you said, like, we might take that for granted in the sense of like seeing the sunset, like, because that is one of my favorite parts of the day. I mean, my wife can attest to all the pictures of sunsets and sunrises that I send her. Hey, sunset kisses, whatever it is. But like, that is one of the most glorious things, is to wake up in the woods and really kind of be, in that sense, that fly on the wall, that person in the blind, where you're getting to see the world. And like you said too, like duck hunting, it's something that most people don't experience that set and setting in their lives. And when they do, I feel like a lot of those folks feel like they've been missing out on something. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's that communion with nature that you have is it's hard to really kind of describe that until you've actually experienced it, because it is soul filling, man. I love it.
Yeah, you mentioned public land, how you haven't done much public land hunting. That's, I do a lot of it. I have a lease as well, but it's, a family friend that, it's 50 acres, but I do a lot of public hunting. And since Texas is mostly, like, the vast majority of Texas is privately owned, the small amount of public land we have kind of gets flooded. For a long time, especially compared to other states that have like vast um, open stretches of public land that you can basically do whatever on, as long as you are following laws, it's public land. And I thought of it as a downside of Texas for a while, that you wouldn't be able to, not everyone is able to access this land. But, Jesse is a big person that changed my mentality on that. And that trip when I was out there, that also contributed to me changing my mind, is that private land is an opportunity for us to work with the landowner, as like have the government work with the landowner and have incentives for people to care for their land and care for animal husbandry and wildlife husbandry. It shouldn't just think of it as a negative. For one, it's not going away. And for two, we have an opportunity to work with people that can do a lot more than the government would and can. And it costs less money to do that. It involves people that own this land that have, they have a stake in this land. They care about it. And, that's something that you don't necessarily always get from a government institution. So, it's really changed my perspective. And, that's one of the things that I really like to focus on, is working with landowners to be able to take new hunters out and show them what Texas beauty can be, what our wildlife is, and what kind of things we can cook from that sort of experience.
Well, it's a great culmination of things there, man. And kind of to piggyback on that idea too. I was, I guess, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, my wife and I decided to contact our local NRCS agent. It's a division of the USDA, and our local county, and figure out some of the things that we can do on our own ranch to be able to build better habitat, help the native wildlife, maybe try to take out some of the non-indigenous, trees, and really plant new forbs and grasses and things that kind of return that property to what it once was, because the landscape in a lot of the country, but there's areas in Texas where what you see now is nothing like what it would have been like 250 years ago. All the different invasives and the things that are coming through. We used to have a lot of grasslands and in central Texas where we have our place, and we're trying to kind of take it back to that to benefit the native herds there. And there's a lot of incentives that, for landowners that may not be aware. I mean, there's financial incentives. There's things, there's obviously tax breaks and things if you do wildlife management and things too. And, and if you do agricultural exemptions and things too, where there's some, tax, significant reductions in the tax you pay. But there's a lot of availability there for people to be able to really establish, new things and practices on their property to help benefit it. And I highly suggest people look into that, because that's something that I think gets overlooked. The CRP programs, we just joined up another one, helping out all the pollinators and the monarch butterflies, and planting, goat weed and things like for them. And we've learned so much about how we can benefit and be able to enhance, and kind of leave it better for the future. And I've also done a lot of work with Sharing the Land. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with them?
No.
So Doug Duran, he does a lot of work with Meat Eater. He's a contributor. I think he's mentioned more on the podcast than anybody else as far as his name. But he developed an initiative called Sharing the Land, where it's bringing together landowners and, land users. And so, someone has, a few hundred acres, and, maybe it's a lot for them to manage, and they want to be able to do whatever they can to better that property. Well, maybe they need to have someone who knows how to operate, machinery, someone who runs, tractors, and then maybe they need to have a certain, doe numbers that are taken each year. And so maybe they only can take a couple themselves for their freezer space. Well, they kind of bring together these land owners and land users to form these collaborative, work efforts to be able to benefit each other. And maybe it's people who want to, go hiking or fishing or camping, or love to do wildlife photography or videography. You know, the reasons that people get out in the outdoors is so vast. And, you know, I think when we think about like what we're doing as far as like hunters and kind of leaving things better, it's not just for hunters, it's for people overall. But it's a really, really cool program. And I think he's, you know, just finished his first year of doing that. Got a lot of great teams involved with them on X, Savage, Vortex. I mean, there's, you know, Matt Maranch, we're one of the partners, but there's a wonderful amount of partners that are out there that are really trying to kind of, you know, kind of forge that union of land users and you know, landowners, which, so it's kind of along that lines you were talking about there. So it just kind of made me think about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a huge goal of mine. So I'll definitely look into that.
Yeah, man. Well, they're always looking for people to be involved. I think, you know,
Mhm.
that you might be a good person in that avenue too, because you bring out something else too in there as far as, you know, being able to, you know, really teach and educate people on, you know, the cooking side of things too.
Mhm.
Getting back into the idea of cooking, I wanted to know, you know, I kind of stopped you short there, kind of went on one of my many different, you know, side angles there as far as what you love to hunt and cook the most. Like, what if you are making a dish for, you know, your friends, a special occasion, if you had everything at your disposal, what would you be making for them? What would your meal be?
I love to cook fish. Fish is probably my favorite thing to cook. I love catching fish, caring for it, especially saltwater fish. That'd probably be my number one. And cooking all sorts of things with it, from curries to dips, ceviche. You know, not cooking it at all. Everything along those lines. And then, you know, also wild boar is another thing that I really, really, really like to cook. Especially people have this mentality that wild boar doesn't taste good or it's really gamey, when in fact wild boar is one of the best meats like ever. It is fantastic, and sometimes it can be on the gamier side or have a stronger flavor, but I've also had boar that tastes like maple syrup, just, you know, one of those acorn boars that just
Mm-hmm.
tastes absolutely fantastic. And it's fun to kind of blow people's minds with how good it can be. um, so yeah, all sorts of game. I have my freezers full of venison, and hog and tons of fish. I also like cooking dove and duck. I just shot an axis a couple days ago that I'm going to be, you know, I'm excited to see how I can prepare that. Probably eat some of it raw and cook it all sorts of different ways.
What parts are you eating raw? Because I know my friends and I, we've done backstrap and heart. Is there anything else besides that that you're rocking out raw?
Yeah, I mean, like the tenderloin is really good
Yeah.
too. You know, it's not, there's not really much fat on it. Although this one was pretty fat. There's not much intramuscular fat. So, and it's such a tender animal that, you know, all those are really good places to harvest from for tartar.
Well, this was your first access too, right?
That's right. Yeah,
That's
yeah, it was
awesome.
fun, man. It was the last day of turkey hunting, and it was on a good friend of mine's ranch, and it was like the last 10 minutes. We didn't get any turkeys. We saw a lot of them and heard a lot of them, but it's pretty late in the season, and I think they all got too beat up, and they didn't want to come try to fight my Jake decoy. And so just couldn't get them in. Tried really hard, and then last 10 minutes of daylight on the last day, my buddy was like jokingly playing his Axis call, and 40 Axis walked around the corner, and we're looking at like where this call was coming from. I'd never seen a call of any sort work that well before. And there were 3 or 4 bucks, and the rest were does. And I had my sights on one in velvet, and I said we were turkey hunting. I also brought a rifle with me because I knew there were access on the property, but
Yeah, just
you
in
know,
case. Right,
just in
right.
case. Why
Yeah,
not?
yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit more to carry, but it was definitely worth it. And my buddy was like, "Yeah, the one on the left, one on the left." And I had my scope up at 16 power, and I was like, "Yeah, I think I'm looking at the one on the left." And I veered over to the left a little bit more, and then saw a monster. I mean, I've never looked through the scope at something that large before. 231 pounds, and large antlers, just enormous, and dropped it where it stood.
That
Nice
is
clean
so
kill.
awesome.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was
231
amazing.
pounds, man. That's a massive animal.
It was big. Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you have? Have you already cooked anything off of it, or what's the
No, I
first meal you
haven't.
got
No.
planned?
We had to get going pretty quickly. I would have cooked
Yeah.
something on it that night if I could have. And it's hanging out in a cooler. I like to cooler age my meat. If I had a walk-in refrigerator, then I would use that. But cooler aging is the next best thing. So I'll keep it in the cooler, depending on what it is, for 1 week to 2 weeks. Just keep it sealed away from water, so no water contact. Keep it in big plastic bags, and then age it in there. It helps the muscles relax. I also try to keep them in as big chunks as possible and connected to bone, so that it is able to loosen under tension. And then I'd finish processing after that 1 or 2 week mark is up.
So walk people through what you're doing. You're field dressing, and then what parts are you trying to keep together, or are you trying to do the whole thing? Talk to us about like how you've got this deer on the ground. Then what are you doing?
So got to get the guts out first thing. So in all hunting and fishing, care for the animal after the kill is like the biggest aspect of making it taste good. If you don't care for it right away, it's going to taste bad. And I think that's one of the issues that people have had with hogs, is they'll let it sit there for too long and let it actually start to go rancid, just from keeping it warm. So you got to get that thing cool as soon as possible. So after the kill, celebrate, and then respect the animal by making sure you take care of it. So getting the guts out of it as quickly as you can, get it hanging so that air is able to go in the cavity and start cooling down the meat, taking the hide off. And then I break it down into the biggest chunks that I can that'll fit in the cooler. So if I had a cooler that was big enough to put the whole thing in there and wrap it up to where it didn't have water contact, then that's what I would do. But this axis, for example, is so large, there's not a cooler alive that would that would fit it. So I took the hindquarters off. I kept the hams attached to the pelvis, broke it right there. And then the next section was the saddle. So from the collarbone to just above the hips, that's one more section. And then I took the neck off. The biggest neck I've ever seen on an animal before. It was absolutely massive. And so keep it contained in all of those, and then take whatever organs you want, take the mesentery lining, take the heart, liver, and save all of those things. It's my first axis, and it was a big buck, so I'm actually gonna mount it. This will be my first mount.
Nice.
So pretty excited about that.
That's cool. What taxidermist you going to?
It's Professional Taxidermy Studio in North Austin, or in Cedar Park.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you just mentioned a term too, and I'm going to butcher it. The what lining? What was it?
Mesentery lining.
Is that the coal fat, or is this a different?
Yeah, it's like it's the net that surrounds the organs, and so it kind of keeps everything bunched together, and it's primarily made of fat.
Yeah,
and so I took it. I hadn't seen axis fat before. It's one of the cool things about like being a chef and then killing something new and harvesting it and taking it apart. You're like, oh wow, this is different. The fat on axis is white, like paper white, or at least this one. And on white-tailed deer, I'm used to not eating the meat or not eating the fat at all.
Fat, right.
That tastes very strong, but I'm definitely going to skillet test this and try it out, because I've never seen. I mean, it's wider than pork fat. So I'll try it out and see if I can cook with it, because that would be ideal. There's a lot of fat in the cavity, and a decent fat cap on it for a deer, especially. It's pretty wild. Some muscle in the neck even had some marbling.
Really?
Intramuscular fat, which is all very new to me for deer. So I'm really excited to see what I can do with this.
That's really cool, man. I was kind of curious what you're going to do with the neck. Are you doing something whole? Or are you going to take that apart in pieces? What's your plan there?
The neck is like probably 30 pounds. 30-pound neck. It's absolutely enormous. So I'll probably cut it off the bone. If it was smaller, like even just a little bit smaller, I might cut it into steaks and leave the bone on. But this is just, it's so massive that it would just be like a steak about that big. So yeah, I'll cut that up and braise it. Some of the muscles in the neck are pretty tender, the two that run along the
Yep.
bottom there. So I might try cooking those a different way. I'll probably also make some jerky out of some parts of it as well.
Some parts of the neck, you mean?
Some parts of the neck, but mostly I'll use larger muscles for that. There can be a lot of connective tissue in the neck, but
Right.
there are some muscles in there that are large enough to use for jerky.
What are the other areas of an animal that you use for jerky a lot?
There's any of the ham muscles. If you're going to break down one of the hind quarters, there's tons of large muscles in there. I try to take off all the sinew and connective tissue as possible, and then cut it at an angle so that the fibers of the muscle are much shorter, so you don't get stringy jerky.
And then
you can use backstrap as well,
Yep.
but for something like this, I would rather use backstrap for steaks or roasts or something like that.
Yeah. So when you're doing your steaks, how are you? I mean, obviously, I think, some people, what do they say? Either you're not cooking it long enough, you're cooking it too long, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, with backstraps these days, it's kind of I've done some chicken fry stuff just because my family likes that. And so I'll kind of cater to the crowd and what they like. But, I've learned more and more that the rarer is the more tasty for me. So, I still want it bleeding, but what are you doing as far as if you're making a steak from a backstrap? How are you preparing it? What is your favorite go-to?
Yeah, if I'm making a steak from a backstrap, then I'm going to do it definitely medium rare. Get a good hard sear on it with really high heat and baste it with butter, garlic, and thyme. So
Yes.
When preparing a steak, I usually, depending on the size of it, I'll either leave it out and let it get closer to room temperature if it's large. If it's smaller, then I want to keep it cold so that the center is more likely to stay raw, with still being able to get a good sear on it. You could even have it frozen if you wanted to have it raw and get even a harder sear on it. But so there's tons of different ways of cooking a steak. You can just do it. The first thing you want to do is season it. And then as you put salt on it and let it sit for a little bit, then it's going to draw some moisture out. That's going to help with the sear. It's going to help get a crust on it. It's also going to help create a pellicle, which is like a harder layer on the outside of the steak so that it retains more moisture on the inside. So from there, don't wipe off the salt. If you put a lot on, then you can take some of that off. Don't wipe off the moisture. Leave that on for searing. And then one of my favorite ways to do it is to reverse sear, is to get a little bit of smoke on it and then hit it in the pan. So bringing the meat up to like 110 degrees, just getting a little bit of, imparting a little bit of that smoked flavor onto the steak, and then hitting it in a cast iron. A lot of people like to use grills and stuff, but you're not going to get a sear like you can in a cast iron skillet. So starting with a neutral oil, put the oil in, get it where there's wisps of smoke, get it that hot, and then put the steak down, flip it over. After about, you can put a time on it, on when to flip it over, but it's better to just go by looking at it until it's not sticking and it gets a good sear on it. Flip the steak over, and then start to get a good sear on it. Once you're getting close to being done, throw some butter, thyme, and garlic in a pan, and more butter than you would think that you'd want to eat, and then start to baste the steak. So you continue to cook the steak by pouring that thyme and garlic flavored butter all over the steak. It's the best way to have steak.
I'm so hungry right now. This sounds delicious. So when you mentioned the kind of working on getting your smoke in, are you doing wood fire smoke? Are you have a Traeger or something set up? Like, what is it that you are doing when we're doing the majority of your, kind of, smoking.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a smoker at home. Most of the smoking I do is at work.
Right.
We have a 1,000-gallon smoker there, a side box, stick burner. So we use pretty large logs on it, and we use 100% mesquite.
Okay.
I love the flavor of mesquite. It has a resin in it that kind of imparts a little bit of a sweet flavor to it, and it also burns really, really well. Using the wood-fired ovens that we have for our pizza at Jester King, I've learned so much about fire and fire maintenance, and that's all cooking really is with smoking and with pizza cooking or cooking with live fire is maintaining your fire. Sorry, what was the question?
Oh no, I'm just kind of curious about, like, whenever you were saying like you were putting some smoke on your steaks, like I was just curious what you had at your house too, because I definitely want to learn more about what, your wood fire stuff that you're doing over at Jester King. But I was just curious about like what kind of, tools of the trade you have at your house and at your disposal.
Yeah. So at home, I cook in. I have a grill outside that I use. I have a propane grill. I also have a charcoal grill. I'm also working on building a fire pit for live fire cooking, using the end of a propane tank as the bowl, and then putting a grate on the side that you can kind of swing off to the side and put stuff on, and then bring it back over and adjust the height and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's cool.
I do love cooking with live fire. My wife and I moved into this house not too long ago, and so we're still working up all of our all the things we want to do.
Sure. No, that list never stops, man. It's we're 5 years into our place, and it's like, okay, what are we going to do next?
Yeah.
But no, that's a big part of it for you, I'm sure, is kind of getting everything set up how you want it. Are you welding and doing all this yourself? Is that a skill set you have as well?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I try to, with all things, I try to do it myself first, and then if I can't do it, then I'll, ask for help. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I bought a welder several years ago and learned to use it. It's just a flux core, but I can put two pieces of metal together.
It'll get the job done.
That's right.
Are there any other hobbies that you have that, aren't on your typical, maybe chef and hunting resume?
Let's see. I mean, hunting and fishing is what I do most of the time, but really spending time outdoors is my number one hobby. In terms of skills, I work on my truck. I try to learn how things work all the time. As a kid, I would just take things apart and learn to put them back together, or not, and then something's broken, or I have somebody else fix it. But investigating, having that investigative mind as a young person's really transferred to doing it as an adult. So if there's anything going on in the house that isn't working properly, then I try to figure it out.
Nice.
And then I'll learn that new skill then.
Yeah. No, that's the best way to do it. It's kind of dive in. And like you said, too, it's like growing up, we didn't have YouTube at our disposal, but now it's like, oh, I got this.
You can do anything. You can do anything. As long as you've got the tools to do it, you can do anything.
As far as, let's say, someone who really is wanting to get involved and, work their way into a kitchen, they maybe are an aspiring chef or cook, and they want to kind of take it to the next level. I wanted to know maybe words of wisdom that you might have, and, suggestions for someone who kind of wants to get into that industry and kind of pursue their passions to that next degree. What is it that you would impart from your experience onto them?
Yeah. I do think I have some wisdom for that. I mean, for one, there's a lot of ego in kitchens. Strip that off of yourself. You're better than nobody. Nobody's better than you. A kitchen is a team of people. It's not about one person. It's not about a few people. It's about everybody. And in order to make something like a kitchen work, everyone has to do their part. Love and respect each other. Learn from other people. Don't think that the only way to do something. That took me a while to figure out. I was like, I care about the way I do something so much that I would get set in my ways. And you really have to learn that someone is going to know how to do something better than you. Like, no matter what it is, there's always going to be someone that's more knowledgeable about something. Also, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions for fear of appearing ignorant. It doesn't appear ignorant. It shows that you're interested in learning, and that you want to better yourself and your knowledge base. And the other part is to take people on just like you would want. Share the knowledge that you have with others. The idea that you're valuable because of the knowledge that you retain is false. It's more, you're valuable because the information you share. All those things, I think, will definitely help you along your path for knowledge.
Yeah, man, those are good points. I like that. As far as kind of thinking about how you want to be remembered, your, legacy in your professional career, and as a chef, as an outdoorsman, personally, family man, what are some things you kind of hope that you have, like, you've made your stamp on the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's less about being remembered, but more about, like, I want to change the world. I really want to change the world. And the way that I'm really want to do that, especially in this extremely divided world, is to open people's eyes to the fact that we are, although there is seemingly so much division in the world, a lot of our values line up. That, we have a tendency, because of institutions in our lives that control, really control our perception of, like, the other side, or, like, pushing you more into your beliefs instead of having an open mind. The difference that I want to make in the world is I want to blur that line of division. I want people to realize that there doesn't need to be two sides, that there really can be meeting in the middle. And the world is going to end a lot sooner if we keep going towards this division than if we all come together. That's the change that I want to make.
How do you want to facilitate that? I know sometimes, coming across and having meals and conversations and these kinds of gatherings in a social atmosphere, but what do you see as kind of your conduit to that?
So, using whatever platform I have, a lot of it, right now, it's mostly just interactions with people. It's starting this conversation, having difficult conversations about issues that are, divisive. And, I use the platform that I have. So whenever I'm able to have these discussions with people, that's what I'm doing now. But, on down the road, I'm not, as much as it terrifies me to think of it, I wouldn't be, opposed to getting into politics at some point to try to change, on a bigger scale.
That is something I actually went to school at Northeastern University up in Boston to become. I wanted to be the president of the United States because I wanted to impart as much possible change as I could. And I very quickly learned that was probably not going to be the path for me. I took like one political science course, and then I'd switch to being an English major so that I could become a teacher, because I felt like I'd have a more direct approach working with kids in a one-on-one environment, or, in a classroom environment, to be able to inspire different people to educate themselves and to, like, realize that, we need to come together too. Because I definitely, echo your sentiment and your feelings there about, there's a lot that's going on in our world. There's so much divisiveness, so many times where people are separated from each other when they may have all these overlaps in things they might like to do or like to eat or things to enjoy, but oh, you're this or you're that. And there's like a line in the sand that I feel like, instead of bringing us together, it divides us. And I definitely applaud your thoughts and efforts for wanting to do that, because I think it's important for people to speak up right now, especially when it may be difficult, and they say, speak up even if your voice shakes. It's like, sometimes you may lose some friends, you may turn some people off by having these conversations, but I think it is very imperative that we do that for us to have some kind of cohesion.
Everyone's seemingly afraid that if they take a step in one direction, then it's a slippery slope. that, if you give an inch, they take a mile. When, we have to form a collective as a country, or we're low hanging fruit. And, in one way or another, we're going to get scooped up, or just, collapse altogether. As an avid hunter and gun owner, whenever I have conversations with people that are, very, very pro gun and very, very pro Second Amendment. I mean, I'm pro Second Amendment, absolutely. But do I want people to do I want everyone to have access to a gun? Absolutely not. There has to be a line in which we say, okay, we made a mistake. There's more that we can do to keep guns out of the hands of people that, shouldn't have them. And having a wife that teaches second grade, this weighs heavy on me. Like I said, I have many guns of my own, and I think that I think that people should be able to have guns. But when I have these conversations with people, they think that are very pro-gun, they're concerned about, if we give a little bit, if we'd say, okay, these people can't have guns, then what's to stop them from moving on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing until they're literally at our door taking our guns out of our hands. And that's one side of the story, and there are valid reasons for that because of how divided we are.
Yep. But
if we can bridge that gap, looking at the other side, that might actually be the case. Maybe they see on the left side, people are they want school shootings to stop, right? It's like the easiest thing to say, like, we don't want people to have everyone to have guns because of school shootings. Nobody does, right? Nobody does. Right. So what do we do about that? Well, we take guns away. It's like, no, that's not going to work. Even if we did take guns away, that's not how it works. Like it wouldn't work, period. You could not take the guns away. So on the left, it's a lot of lack of knowledge of the subject, of the details of, like, what would happen if we did this? We're kind of seeing it right now with the pistol brace, AR-15 pistol brace rule, that people aren't going to comply. You can have this, you can take these things away, something that you said that was legal, and you can take it away or try to, and no one's going to comply. So we have to come to an agreement together of, like, what is the next step? What are we going to do? And stick to it.
It's a different world than what you and I grew up in, and I mean, I'm not sure, if we're the same age there too, but we're close. And, Columbine was kind of that first, time where it's like, oh, we have a different problem on our hands now.
Yeah.
And it's scary.
And now it's every week. I mean, it's just all the time, mass shootings here all the time. I think there was one today.
See, I don't even know, but I'm sure, I'll see the news as soon as I get out. I mean, but we become numb to that idea because of how much violence. And I know that that's going to be the first thing that they, it's like the first thing they show on the news is all the violent activities, the deaths, the mayhem and stuff too. And it's almost like, as a culture, there's kind of this addiction to that, in that sense. Like, that's the first thing you're fed. And then that kind of fear, that unrest that you have too, but you have to embrace that as the news of, like, what is happening, because in a microcosmic level of what's happening in our own cities, that's happening across the country. And I think it's very important, man, that we have those conversations. It's difficult. A lot of people don't want to talk about this.
Yeah. It's very divisive. And I mean, I think everyone agrees that something needs to be done. I think, like, more strict background checks is an easy place to start. I think that's something that we seemingly could all agree on. When I had that conversation with people of both sides, then they're in agreement. It's like, okay, well, why can't we do that? Well, because it's a slippery slope, blah, blah, blah. So I just, if we keep to our sides, if the left keeps to the left and the right keeps to the right, and we just get more concentrated over there, then there's this, like, ball of energy building up, and it's going to eventually go to one side or the other, depending on, who's in charge at the time or whatever. Right. And that ball of energy is going to explode, and no one's going to have a good time.
Right.
You know,
And I feel
uh,
like when we're talking about those two sides, it's like there is an extreme on this side, there's an extreme on that side, but probably deep down, the majority of us are probably in that in-between space. And we have a lot more overlap of who we are and what we want and these ideals of our communities, local, state, government levels. There's, obviously there's a lot of different things that may be religious based that, maybe tip one person on this scale or another, or, financially where you grew up and what kind of, if you're, if you're in a lower income setting, you're going to see the world differently than folks who are super rich. It's just going to happen. And, but the most of us, have these cross correlations of our lives that are in that middle, that we're not on the extreme. There's not as many, the far left gets to hear all about the far right. And the far right always hears about the far left, but it's like, I feel like it's these smaller sets than there actually is. I feel like the majority of us are kind of more along in the middle, man. We have more in common. And
yeah, I totally agree. I think that there's, two or three topics, like individual topics that stick people to their side. That is definitely a difficult thing to navigate, as to how to bridge those gaps, how to come to agreement on something like that, because people don't want to budge on those really important topics, like big deal topics. And then, that's where the vote goes. And that's where the things like Facebook and social media concentrate information fed to you. I mean,
yeah,
it's no secret that, your phones listen to you, that like, TikTok is listening to you, that like all these things are actually catering what you see to, what they want you to see. And they can make you believe something by just like forming your environment around you, at least on the internet.
well, absolutely. It's like it's a vacuum chamber of your information, man. And it's what you search out, and your news is going to remain the same, or it's going to be more, controlled, and it's going to be more, narrowed down to certain things, and you're not going to hear the other side. Being an English major, it was like one of the things that I learned too is like, I had a professor who said, I think it was a philosophy and English, like kind of crossover class. And I remember this guy was like, okay, you're going to give a speech about, something that you believe, find something that you believe really wholeheartedly in, and that you have 100% that you feel like you can back up every single argument. And so everyone kind of, picked their thing. And he's like, okay, here's your assignment. Now you're doing the opposite. And I don't want to do the opposite. I was like, oh, this is fun, because I'd love to be able to, I'm sure this term exists, but I always kind of talk about multi-perspectivism, like this idea that like, I want to try to see a subject from 360 degrees, man. I want to sit in everyone else's shoes so that I can understand where people are coming from, so that I can have a better understanding of them as a human being and culturally. So like, I have a very diverse group of people that I've met throughout my life. I've been blessed to travel and meet amazing people. And that has given me a formulated, like experience of the world, and being able to see it through other ways, so that I can be able to have compassion and empathy for other people and what they're going through, and, understanding and support. Yeah. Oh, you believe that because you were raised this way. Cool. Right on. I understand now. Like, I'm not dismissive because it's different than me. I understand where you're coming from. And I feel like all too often people aren't doing that as much anymore. It's like you stick with your guns and, pun not intended there, but you stick with like your belief systems, and a lot of people are told to stay in those lines. Don't go over here and learn about that. Where I feel like the most important thing is study the things that are outside of yourself and your own belief system, so that you can become more educated about it. But that's a hard ask sometimes for people.
It's extremely important for every interaction, every relationship we have. Like my relationship with my wife, for example. I mean, like taking a step outside of your own shoes, putting yourself in her shoes, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, looking on the inside, that multi-perspectivism that you mentioned, like it's incredibly important. And it's a skill that we should all be constantly trying to get better at.
Yeah, man, I agree. And it's just because I've had good teachers who have brought that and, and kind of, that I've learned from them, have asked those questions, or they've imparted that knowledge. It's nowhere near my own formulated thing. It's, I'm borrowing from the shoulders of giants, right? Same
Right.
kind of thing, like you said, too. Ask those questions, whatever role you're in, you want to learn more. And, kind of going back to roles, when you kind of mentioned about maybe, wanting to find your way into politics at some point in time, do you have an idea on how you would see yourself in that world? Do you see, like, I feel like this position might be good, or, do you want to like work locally and work your way up? And I mean, maybe this isn't formulated yet, but have you entertained those ideas in your mind about what you might want to do in that avenue?
No, I'm not exactly sure, but what I'm leaning towards is probably starting locally and working my way around, kind of working every angle that I can and learn as much about the process as I can, and like where I can make the most difference.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great, man. Well, I mean, I think you'd be doing a great job in whatever you end up going after. I mean, I see you as your professional life, and obviously what you're doing, and culturally, and helping people, and being leading a team that you do, or leading with a team, maybe would probably be a better way to say it, because you're, like you said too, you're not trying to control that environment. You're very open with it, but being a part of that kind of community aspect, whether it's in in the kitchen, whether you're out there, at the ranch there, and you're working with other people, and I know that you do that very well. So I could see a cool future, and even if it's just a side thing that you're doing too, and a school board or whatever it is that's kind of locally to make a difference, man. I think that's a great thing to want to do.
Yeah, it's daunting and exciting and not exciting at the same time.
Sure. No, I get that as well, man. I get that as well.
Yeah. But it'd probably be further down the road quite a bit. So
yeah. Well, what are some other things that you kind of see yourself that you want to do in your near future, as far as maybe some hunts you want to go on, places you want to travel? What are some things that are on your bucket list that you're looking to knock out, since you just did your access and you kind of got that one checked off? Is there some other things on your short list that you have?
Oh yeah, I've always wanted to get Aoudad. I love turkey hunting, and I have a friend with one property that has a lot of turkeys on it, but I always want to get turkeys. They're a blast, and I'd love to travel to get turkeys. And I still I bow hunt, so traveling to other states and getting whitetail or mule deer or elk, all that is very attractive to me. But I also love to travel just to experience other places, and not always just to hunt. So I would love to spend some time in South America. Mm-hmm. Go to Costa Rica, go to even going to like the Amazon and experiencing that level of like wild, to be inspired and to like see another ecosystem that is very similar in some ways, but also like completely different. It's one of my favorite things to do when my wife and I travel, is to either have a portion of our trip be camping, or spend several days outside. Even if we go to a city, then we'll spend time in the outdoors. It helps you get much more of a feel of the place that you're at, this different part of the world that we live.
Well, tell everyone where they can find you and they can follow along. And, if you want to kind of plug the projects you've been a part of, and where, people can go and learn more about those as well, please.
Of course. Yeah. You can find me at, you can email me at huffman.mason@gmail.com. My Instagram is amasonoutdoors. I work at Jester King Brewery on the southwest side of Austin, off of Fitzhugh Road. And yeah, that's my thing.
Nice. And then for folks who may want to go and do some hunting with you, and maybe even Jesse there, how do they go ahead and get involved in that?
Yeah, go to daidue.com. It's DAIDUE.com. And that's where New School of Traditional Cookery has its explanation, and you can learn a lot more about all that stuff there.
Good deal. Well, hey, Mason, thank you so much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed our conversation, learned a lot, and I hope that, all the listeners enjoy this too. I think they will. And definitely have to have you back on again sometime. So thanks again for joining us, man.
Thanks so much, George. Appreciate you having me.
Cheers, man. Take care. Have a good day.
Cheers. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.